to Extraordinary Women, a podcast where everyday women talk about the extraordinary things they've achieved in their lives. With me, your host, Denise O'Brien. So, welcome to this month's episode of Extraordinary Women, our podcast about everyday women who have achieved something extraordinary in their lives. I am really happy to have Geraldine Lambert on with me today. I know Geraldine as a native of Shannon, but I'm sure she'll tell us where she really originates from as we get into our conversation. So, welcome, Geraldine.
Thank you, Denise, and I'm delighted to be here with you. Thank you.
Brilliant. No, it's great to have you on board. So for the listenership, I guess for me, the reason I asked Geraldine to come on was I wrote an article recently about women who kind of were trailblazers in my view. And I grew up in Shannon, here, County Clare. And there were 3 women in Shannon at that time who were involved in politics and who just, when I look back, and especially knowing, you know, the role that women played at the time and where women's place was in society in Ireland at that time, I look back now in awe at kind of how these women broke the mold and trailblazed a pathway for other women to do the same, in their wake. And Geraldine was one of those women. So, Geraldine, maybe if you'd like to start by telling us a bit about where you are from and how you ended up in Shannon, because I know that time when you were in Shannon, nobody was actually from Shannon. So,
and I'm sure so many people, and we often talk about the mass exodus that would happen at weekends, especially bank holiday weekends. Shannon would be like a ghost town because people went home because Shannon wasn't home for us in that sense. I came from hospital in County Limerick. Originally, we had been up near Ballylanders. We'd moved to hospital when I was 4. And when I came to Shannon, I came at the end of 1971, very end of 1971, went back home to hospital for New Year's, and then thoroughly arrived, I suppose, in 1972 with a 5-month-old child in home, in tow. We came to Shannon, John and I. John is from Tulla. And we came because there was a job in Shannon and there was a house in Shannon. And I suppose it's so hard to realise now. We applied to Shannon Development for a house because John got the job on the industrial estate.
Yeah.
And we got a catalogue to pick a house.
Oh my God.
You could pick a house in Drumgeely, you could pick a house in Finian, you could pick a house in Aden, you could pick a house off a catalogue.
Wow. Oh my God.
I mean, it is so hard to imagine that happening, but that's what happened with us. I picked the house I'm in here in Allen Park because a neighbour of mine was living in Slaney Park. They were the only people I knew in Shannon.
Yeah.
And they were in Slaney, and I said, okay, well, I'd be near. And so that would be okay. So we moved in, and you moved in with nothing. There was no, everything was just... You had an empty house and you had to set about furnishing it with all of that. So I'm in Shannon officially, I suppose I'd say since 1972.
Wow. Okay. And
yes.
And did you see, I know for my parents, I remember my mum, God rest her, saying that like she's from Limerick City, the heart of Limerick City.
Yes.
And her intention was to always go back to the city, but they never did, obviously, like, did you feel at the time that Shannon was going to be home, like for you and your family?
I actually did. I never had any desire really to move anywhere, and I didn't even move out of the house I moved into then. I didn't move within Shannon, which a lot of people did as newer houses got built or different areas or whatever, people moved. But no, I didn't feel any need. And in actual fact, in Allen Park, there are like about a half a dozen of us who moved in or around within sort of a 5-year space, and we're still here.
Amazing. So
good,
you've obviously seen that the landscape of Shannon then change significantly since then. I mean, what?
Oh, hugely changed. I mean, when I moved in, you had Drumgeely, you had Tullyglass, and then you had to go. Tolla Park was just being built, and then there was a gap and then there was Aidan and Finian. So you had two parts of the town and a gap in the middle. Traddery had been built as well.
Okay.
So, all of that. But there was no Cunarna was built after that. Tull Park was only being built. And then, of course, you had the whole Cronin built in the 70s as well. But I suppose I was fortunate that when I moved in Drumgeely, of course, we had all the services here in Drumgeely at the time. You had the bank, the post office, the ESB,
Wow.
the supermarket, the whole lot here. But I remember my neighbours saying, that they'd have to wait for a mobile shop, and the school was in Drumgeely Hall, all of that kind of thing. So I was fortunate. The school was here, the church was here, the shops were here, and the town centre opened in March. So.
Okay. Wow. So the town had been built by the time you came, and all the facilities were there and ready.
A lot of the facilities were there anyway. And in actual fact, of course, because it's a big issue at the moment for a number of years back with the lack of certain facilities. But we had Drumgeely Hall, which was a hive of activity. We had Park Hall, which was another hive of activity. And there was Tullyverriga Hall. There were tennis courts up by Drumgeely Hall, as you remember. And the GAA was just getting going, so they set up around that time as well. So there was an awful lot happening, and then Shannon Town got going. So there were clubs, a lot of clubs and organisations even then, and that was 10 years from sort of the first lot of people moving into the town.
Yeah, so you're over 40 years in the town then, is that correct?
50, over 50,
yeah.
just over 50 years.
Yeah. Wow.
I know, hard
And
to imagine. Yeah.
in terms of yourself then and your role then when you came to Shannon, you were child rearing, I guess. Were you working?
I was child rearing. I got a job in Callans, and then got pregnant with my second child and sort of left. So I had a good number of years then that I was child rearing. I had another, so I had the two girls close together at 14 months apart. And then John was born a couple of years later, 1970, 4 years later. And then there was a late addition in 1982. So there were 6 years, 4 years and 6 years between the others. But so I was, and then I back in, I can't remember when. At different times I'd be doing different jobs. Maybe I did some substitute work in the schools and stuff like that. And then when they got older, I was lucky enough to get part-time work in different jobs. So built from there. And in between, then there was the political life.
Yeah. So tell us about that then. So you're in Shannon, you're settled, you're rearing the children, your husband is going out to work, and I presume, and you're getting part-time work here and there. So where did the political agenda make an appearance, or was that always part of?
It was, well, I was always interested in it because I'd at home in hospital. My parents were certainly my mother was, and she was Fianna Fáil, even because my father was, obviously, even though all of our people were Fine Gael. So it was kind of that marriage, but you'd always know what was going on, and it was an apolitical household in the sense that while the Fianna Fáil and the late Des O'Malley used to talk about the meetings he would hold in our house, and how he'd be put at the top of the table with the fire behind him and he's sweltering in the heat. He mentioned that to me more than once. But the late Tom O'Connell, who was the Fine Gaeler, he was a great friend of the family, and would always call. And, when I met him in later life in Limerick, he'd always talk about my mother in particular, because I suppose my father was dead. My father died in 1969, but he had been away working in England then as well. So it was my mother was the one who really, that they knew best. And even Stevie Coughlin was another one who was the Labour TD for the constituency. He would call, and he would. So we kind of had that, even though it was Fianna Fáil, we
Mm-hmm.
were exposed, and I was just interested. I'd always know who the Taoiseach was and
Yeah.
what party was. It was easy to know what parties were in power then. It was one or other.
Yeah.
So I was always interested in. So I just kind of, and I'd read and I'd know that. And where it started in Shannon, I was only thinking about it the other day in
Mm-hmm.
advance of this. Believe it or not, I got involved in politics in Shannon for a very specific reason. Way back in the late 70s, this would be about 1977 because it's 78, because John was only a toddler. Drumgeely Youth Club was established, and the late Tess Barry and Joe Kerr and a few people like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I got involved because my youngsters were just, the two girls were a little bit older, so they were at an age where they'd be coming up to needing it. And
Yeah.
a lot of the neighbours would have talked about, something for the children. So we got involved with that and we set it up and got it established in Drumgeely Hall. But of course, we had to take our place in a queue for it like that. But in the meantime, Park Hall was lying idle. So we took over Park Hall.
Yeah.
We needed to get it derated.
Okay.
And that was a political decision that would have to be made. Well, it was a decision for Clare County Council, but generally those times you had to get a TD or something to intervene. So in essence, I kind of joined Fianna Fáil to get access to the political system to get Park Hall derated. And we did.
And that meant then that you could use it for the youth club and whatever you wanted.
We were able to use that for the youth club, and we were able to have a drop-in place that was for the older ones. We still took the younger ones up to Drumgeely Hall because they had a lot more space there.
Okay.
But we were able to have different things going on in Park Hall then.
Great. So was that your interest in providing an outlet for the youth of Shannon, coupled with the background and the introduction you had to politics sitting at home at the kitchen table by the sounds of it? But that sounds very interesting, actually. If I can just go back just a second to, growing up in hospital with, the politicians calling to see the family and having the chats, do you remember, was there political debate at the table? Do you remember the discussions or anyone being particularly passionate about different things?
I don't really, because it was just normal, that I'd hear my parents or I'd hear different people that were coming in talking about something that was going on. But I didn't really pay that much attention to it at the time. Other than when I think back, I knew I had an awareness of things going on, but I wasn't, and I know people find this hard to believe, but I was incredibly shy. I wouldn't get in there. I wouldn't talk much at all at the time, and I'd make myself scarce. But I suppose I'd be passing through. Well, you wouldn't be allowed to pass through the meeting room when they were going on, But I suppose I'd hear. I'd be aware of things without even knowing it, that kind of way. I'd be absorbed. It just goes to show what children absorb without ever thinking about. Yeah.
And were there any women in politics at that time that you were aware of? Going back to
no, my mother. No, there weren't. There was a very odd one kind of, but I wasn't really that aware of it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't, and there wouldn't be women coming to the meetings now. They'd be all men.
Yeah.
I don't think my mother even went to the meetings. She probably just, set it all up, and that I can't even remember if she went to the meetings.
Okay.
I don't think she did. I think they were just held in our house,
But in some way, the seed was sown anyway. You had by osmosis, you had some kind of an awareness of politics.
That's exactly it. Yes. Yeah.
And so then here we are. Then it's coming up to, I suppose, 1980. Then, so you stepped into the political arena with the agenda.
I did. I joined around 1977, 78. And in actual fact, then in 1979 was the post office strike, the postman strike, and John was a postman at the time. So he was part of that. He was part of the strike. So obviously, and I was in Fianna Fáil at the time. So he'd be constantly discussing it and making
Yeah.
representations, etc. And it went on and on. That was a bad time actually, because it went on for 19 weeks. That
Wow.
strike went on for.
Okay.
Mm,
I was
it was a, yeah,
I was born around that time, 77,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I see your son John and I around the same age. So
That's right. Yes.
yeah. So how, like, for anybody listening who doesn't know much about politics, but has an interest, like, how did you get involved? What did you need to do? How did that work? Very, for anyone who doesn't understand the process.
Mm. It for me. I was talking to people, I suppose, because I was approaching them about something or other, probably the youth club,
Mm,
and I think there were grants and that. So, and at the time, I knew, and a lot of the local people,
mm,
uh, like the late Joe Connolly and John Roach and those. I knew them actually from the odd times I'd go up to the crossroads, because that
yeah.
was the only place. And there'd be conversations going on, and I'd be listening, or I'd be joining in or saying my piece, kind of thing.
Mm,
And in actual fact, it was probably John, my husband, that pushed me and said, you should join, or said to them, she's interested or whatever.
okay.
So somebody said, "Will you join?" I can't remember who,
Mhm.
because then you had to be you had to be nominated and seconded, as you still do, like
Yeah.
to join a common. But that it's kind of a formality. But you could join the party without doing that.
Yeah.
Um, but then there were monthlies. It all just took off from there, because at that time things were very active, and there were monthly meetings, and so you'd be, there was a lot going on, and you'd know what was going on, because the month came around very fast, for
Yeah.
the meetings and stuff going on. So I joined, and I became secretary of the Common a few years later, which was
Hmm.
a very responsible task.
I can imagine there's
It
a lot.
wasn't that
Yeah.
easy
Yeah.
to get that job, but I did, and did that job for quite a number of years.
Mhm. Okay. And
You know,
in Shannon then around that time, Geraldine, there was a lot going on. I mean,
yeah,
we're a multicultural society here in Shannon way before that
yeah,
was ever even popularized, and
yeah.
people from all walks of life with different agendas, and different,
Mm,
both political agendas as well. So you were in that arena, and there were a couple of other
mm.
females in politics then in Shannon as well. So I don't know, were you all doing your thing around the same time, or so
I
is it,
suppose one of the
yeah.
things always that when I think of women in politics, we were so lucky in Shannon. Kathleen Ryan, the late Kathleen Ryan, was in the Common before me.
Mm,
Um, and of course Kathleen was so active in so many things going on in Shannon. She and others had set up the ICA and the Society of Care, as it was then, and various things like that. So, and she lived quite close to me. And
mm,
then you had Patricia McCarthy, who was in the Labour Party at the time, and who was sort of, so steeped in politics. So those two were close by, in terms of they lived close, here
yeah.
in the Drumgeely area.
Mm,
So it wasn't as hard, I suppose, in ways to break into politics in Shannon as it might have been in other areas.
mm,
I consider the Fianna Fáil coming in Shannon to have been quite progressive, in that there were no obstacles put in, certainly in my way anyway.
mm,
Um, and then because we'd have monthly meetings with Shannon Development as well, from the Common, and I would attend those. So that's where you'd be raising the issues about, lights or water, or anything that was going on. Shannon Development was responsible for all of the infrastructure of Shannon at the time, as regards housing. And of course, we had housing office, and
yeah.
I mean, when you think back, like we had the community office when I came here, and all of that was there.
Yeah.
So we had access, I suppose, to sort of senior officials in Shannon Development, so we always knew what was going on.
Wow. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
a whole.
And women, Kathleen and I would go to both, would generally go to those meetings with a couple of others. And there was never a sense in my mind that you can't go because you're a woman.
Yeah.
We were there and we were included. Now we were both at that stage vocal enough and smart enough. And it would be it would be a tough person that would have put Kathleen down, I'll tell you that. She
Yeah.
was fairly formidable in a quiet enough way.
And yourself, I mean, you mentioned when you were younger that you were shy. So you obviously overcame many obstacles yourself in finding your voice, and representing the people of Shannon. Like, how did you do that?
With difficulty in one sense, but I suppose when I got and even yet when I get on a hobby horse, people will know it's hard to stop me when I
Uh-huh.
start on something. And I would, even then, like even though I'd be quiet or shy in certain settings, when it came to sort of pushing for something, or I don't like using the word passionate, but things meant a lot to me at the time. And
Yeah.
I love Shannon. I loved it then. I loved it from the day I set foot in it. I still love it. I still think it's such a fabulous town. It's such a great place to bring up children. And we just don't make enough of it. And there was so much, I suppose, because it was a developing town, there was so much going on all the time, and so much that you could speak about and articulate
Yeah.
about. So, and I love the fact it's all speech and drama now, but when I went to school, we had elocution lessons.
Oh, wow. Oh, very good.
so,
So that
so we had a very broad education in the
excellent.
convent, in the hospital, and you had all of that kind of stuff. So it all stood to me, I suppose.
Of course, yeah. And
Yeah.
when you look back now, I mean, what do you feel you're most proud of, like in all the wins that you had over the years and the successes? Like, is there anything that stands out for you as something?
There,
Yeah.
no, there aren't. I suppose there aren't very particular things. Getting elected to Shannon Town Council and getting re-elected a couple of times after that was absolutely huge. And that took an awful lot, because going out, standing on doors,
Yeah.
asking for votes for myself was really, really difficult. I have no problem standing on a door asking for a vote for other people, but
Yeah.
standing asking for myself was hugely difficult. I mean, I would have to just drag myself out. Now, once I got out and started knocking at the doors, I kind of
Yes.
got
Yeah.
into a thing to go. But
I think I can
night
remember
after night,
that. Like, I can remember,
yeah,
being a child and seeing yourself or Patricia,
being a
coming
yeah,
to the doors and
yeah.
just
I
being,
just found that
yeah.
extraordinarily difficult. And it was one of the reasons I remember because I ran in 1982 when I was heavily pregnant, as in the election was on the 8th or 10th of March, I think, and Jeff was born on the 25th.
Wow.
And I was canvassing right up to that. And we had canvassed, that was in March, there was a general election in November, and there was a general election in January. That was the time when there was election after election after election.
Yeah.
There was a general election in June. I think I got pregnant after that. There was a plebiscite in October to establish, to ask people in the town if they wanted a town commissioners, as it was then. So I canvassed for that. Then there was a general election in November. I canvassed. There was a general election in January, end of January. I canvassed for that. And there was the town commissioners election in February. And I was just getting progressively bigger.
Wow. I mean, in terms of, women, and obviously it's very topical at the moment. We have our
Mhm.
referendum, and this we get to have a say about women's role and how it's officially noted in the Constitution. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, coming from where you came from, and
Yeah, you see, I just it's kind of I just never, well, I was never that much of a home bird anyway. I'd use really and still would use most excuses to be out or to be doing something else. Housework doesn't that much appeal to me.
Mm.
Um, but on the other hand, I was happy, you know, it was good that I was able to be home when the children were smaller.
Mm.
And certainly with two small ones close together and then another one a couple of years later, it helped a lot, like that I was home and then had the facility, apologies, had the facility to work part-time in a number of posts, which really, you know, and that was the beauty of Shannon. There was so much going on like that you could do those kind of things.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so sad that in many ways that we've gone backwards for women in politics instead of going forward. As I said, we were lucky in Shannon. We had 4 women elected to the first town council,
Yeah.
which was, you know, amazing. That was Kathleen and myself, Fianna Fáil, Patricia in Labour, and Bridget Makowski, whom you mentioned as well, who was another very formidable woman.
Yeah.
The late Bridget Makowski. But in terms of, like, one of the difficulties I have is that any wording in the Constitution would be used to keep women in the home. I think women should have a choice. I absolutely, there are women, and it's great that women will stay in the home because they will look after other people. They will engage a lot of them in voluntary work. They will mind maybe other children, they mind elderly, or they visit. They do various things. It's horses for courses. There are rules for everybody. But I wouldn't want anybody to feel that the Constitution says this is where you should be.
Yeah.
I have no problem with the Constitution recognising the value of women in the home. But equally, there are a lot of men now in the home, a lot more than would have been, and there are house husbands. And why should it only be a role for women? Why don't we value the role of men in the home?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
You know, and there's been a
And
massive
equally
shift.
with caring, you know, caring isn't just a woman's duties.
I know.
You know, every every man is a son in the first instance. And maybe there are caring responsibilities there. And then for men that are fathers or have siblings that need care, etc. You know, and an awful lot of men do that. And I don't think that is recognised as much as it should be at all. I think we just assume that it's women will do that. And we forget that an awful lot of men are doing it anyway. And in actual fact, it's the reverse discrimination that we don't recognise the men for that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you know, and there are groups out there, you know, kind of advocating on behalf of men in different scenarios in the family unit, especially, you know. Yeah, so
Indeed.
maybe that's a conversation we can have another time.
I think it is. Yeah.
Another topic. But just so in terms of your career, where you're at now, I mean, where did life bring you since the height of it all?
Well, life brought me a lot of different places that I probably wouldn't have expected. I served on the town commissioners, which later then became the town council, from 1985. I didn't get elected in 1982. I got elected in 95 and then in subsequent elections. And I retired from that. I made a decision in 2007 that I wouldn't run again. And so I retired in 2009. So I had 24 years and I absolutely loved it. I loved and I felt it was a great honour and a great privilege. And I was also very privileged to be elected chair of the commissioners and then the chairperson of the commissioners and then the town council. And I was actually the first person to be elected 3 times and the first person to be elected 4 times. And I think I'm still the only person. And of course, because the town council is gone, nobody is going to be elected 4 times unless it's brought back. And I could have a whole hour of how badly needed that and what a bad decision it
I'd
was
actually love
to
to talk to you.
abolish town
Yeah,
councils.
I'd
But
love to talk
that,
about that again, definitely about the future
yeah,
of Shannon.
but there were a number of factors there. I had changed, I had gone from different jobs. I'd been working here in Shannon for a number of years, and then I had taken a job in Limerick. And at that stage, I was a senior manager in that job, and putting in a lot of hours and loved it. It was for a local development company in Limerick, Paul Partnership, which would be the equivalent of the Clare Local Development Company here in
Yeah.
Clare. And I was managing up the employment services section. So it was a busy role, and while politics, obviously, you wouldn't be shouting out that that you're an elected representative of that. But I was able to bring I suppose, those nuances, that experience, those connections to that job. But then as I say, it was quite busy, and I took on to do a master's at the time, which, I had put all of that kind of stuff on the back burner for so long because of the political life, because I loved it, and I couldn't see myself giving up an hour of it. And I couldn't take on that and the job and the children and the house and the whole lot. And then I said, no, I want to do this. So I did it and made the decision then that I would leave politics. So I was in that job, finished the master's in 2011, and then I was in that job until I retired at the end of 2017. Absolutely loved it. And then I retired, and I had plans for doing nothing, catching up on afternoon TV, doing, maybe going places, using my free travel and hopping on buses and whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of those plans are still there. They kind of haven't come to fruition yet because events, dear boy. Who was it said that events, dear boy?
So that life had other plans for you.
Life had other plans, but you know what? It's lovely. It was lovely to be retired and to be able to give more time to grandchildren, and I have two great grandchildren that are the light of my life. And I can be busy with those, and I have time. I have certain time, but in between, I've taken on different things. I was latterly doing some work with the Central Statistics Office, which was part-time, so I've just left that now. But I suppose my big focus at the moment is the Shannon Community Partnership. I was asked a couple of years ago, Niamh O'Callaghan, another lady that works hard for Shannon, asked me if I'd be interested in getting involved. And I went to a couple of meetings, and that was the Love Shannon Community Council at the time. And I suppose there again, it was the first meetings were Zoom meetings because it was still in COVID. And then when that finished and we were getting back together again, I could see a deficit in it, in that you had people there really passionate, really committed to Shannon and to improving things in Shannon, and at the same time falling between stools because they weren't, I suppose it wasn't a cohesive unit, in that different people didn't know. We just weren't cohesive. We weren't really sure and clear about where we were going. So we've spent the last year working with another Shannon native, Sinead Doody, who's an independent consultant, got paid for some of it, gave us a huge amount of time pro bono to help us develop and really understand what we were about. We changed the name then to Shannon Community Partnership to actually, I suppose, really highlight the fact that it's the community, it's the business community, it's the organizations and the groups, it's individuals, it's anybody who really wants to progress Shannon as the town that it can be.
Yes, and there's, like, I know there's a website now that people can go to if they want to find out about the Shannon.
Absolutely. Yeah, Shannon Community Partnership. Shannon SCP is shannoncp.ie.
Shannoncp.ie. And we can put that in this as well for people to find.
And we're just about to launch the Shannon Community Network. And that will be like an umbrella group of organisations in the town, whereas the Shannon Community Partnership is individuals with particular skills or interests or skills that will change from time to time. But you couldn't involve every organisation in the partnership because it would be completely unworkable. But at the same time, organisations have different needs at different times. So this community network will be the facility for them. It will meet many times during the year, hopefully, and it will maybe form working groups or task groups to take on different things that are coming up or that people want to progress. So that's hugely exciting because there never has been any of this in the town from way back. We didn't need a lot of that because you had the central role, I suppose, of Shannon Town Council, the elected council, which because of the way Shannon was, we were all local people and meeting people in the town centre or the shops or the sidelines of matches or things. So it didn't need, I suppose, that. But once that town council was gone, it was necessary to have something like that. So really excited about that. I'm planning for the next retirement.
Planning for retirement again, second time round.
Yeah. I could write the book on planning for retirement.
Or maybe there's a book, and there's definitely a book in you. And I suppose I would love to have you back again to talk more about, I'm very passionate about Shannon myself as well, and also, females in politics and just female representation across the board. So maybe we can have a chat again
And I cannot stress enough the need for females. As I say, we've been lucky in Shannon in that, and we still have a female councillor here in Shannon, in Donna. But overall, there just aren't enough women involved. And politics isn't that friendly to women, and it's getting less and less friendly.
Yeah.
And I know I said Shannon was great, but overall, like, constituencies aren't good for women. Politics it takes a lot of hours and it takes a lot of antisocial hours, let's say, and you have to be able to have the time for things like that. But equally, a lot of men that are involved in it have full-time jobs. So that has to be a balance there, that if the woman is going, then and that comes back to joint care in the house, and a lot more men are doing that now than there were in my time. I was very fortunate, as was, I know, Patricia McCarthy and Kathleen Ryan. We had and you had Bridget Makowski and Marcella Murphy, people like that. We had people behind us that supported us and that took on roles that weren't the norm at the time, I suppose, for husbands. But we were lucky.
So
but
behind you.
It is difficult. It is difficult. But it's not impossible. And the thing is, if women go into politics, you can change those things. You can't change it waiting on the sidelines.
So your advice, so to wrap it up then, what advice would you have maybe for someone who's listening to this who would have an interest in a political career, who happens to be female? Any advice?
I would say go for it. There is a lot of help and a lot of support. All the parties have support people or organisation, women's groups, or they have people, that you could reach out to, and not always other females. They have the very progressive men that will help and support and walk the streets with you. And it's actually, I used to say it was my addiction because I wasn't really a drinker and I never smoked, but God give me politics and I was hooked on it. It's hugely interesting. It's hugely satisfying, both personally, and it can be satisfying professionally. But you have to be able to step back from it. It's personal. When you lose an election, it is extremely personal. I always say to people, don't, but you move on from it and you still stay involved or whatever. But there's quite a lot of support there for people if they want to get involved. And there are and of course, as I say, we miss the town council because you don't have that facility, I suppose, to come up at that level before you get involved in the county council level, and it's much harder, a lot less places, a lot more competition. But there are different ways of being involved in politics besides just elected politics. You can start on the ground, and even things like the Women's Shed would offer huge support and huge, I suppose, a sounding boards for people if they wanted to get involved. Things like that are there and can be done.
Yes,
Go
great.
for it, I would say.
Your advice, go for it. Okay, well,
Go for it.
yeah. So I'd love to continue this conversation again, Geraldine. Will you come back and talk to us more?
I will indeed. I'd be very happy to. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Geraldine, thanks a million for your time today. You are an extraordinary woman, and I'm really glad that you spent your time here chatting to me today. And I look forward to our next catch up.
Thank you very much, Denise, and thank you for the invitation. And can I say you're an extraordinary woman yourself, and good for you. I'd love to talk to you again.
Thanks very much. You've been listening to Extraordinary Women with Denise O'Brien and guests. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to get in touch, please contact me directly at denise@o'brienlearningsolutions.ie or check out my website www.o'brienlearningsolutions.ie, where you'll find more free resources and interesting articles. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to spread the word and get in touch if you are an extraordinary woman who would like to share her story.